Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to talk about CleanSpark Inc.'s latest press release. They did announce that they hit 50 exahash. Question is, how much higher will they go this year? We'll take a look and see if they give us any details on that. Also, I want to look at the June Bitcoin mined so far using their publicly traded wallet, and I'll take a stab at the profitability, and we'll look at the cash flow situation to see how they're doing so far. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, and let's start with this press release. I'm going to start at the very top here. It says, as of June 24th, 2025, CleanSpark, America's Bitcoin miner, today announced it had achieved its mid-year target of 50 exahash per second of operational hash rate, a measure of computing power dedicated to Bitcoin mining. So here's a quote from Zach Bradford, the CEO. He said, reaching 50 exahash is a major milestone. It reflects a focused strategy, disciplined execution, and relentless commitment to doing the things the right way. Also, he says this growth did not happen by chance. It's a result of building and operating our own infrastructure, often from the ground up, which has given us control, resilience, and scalability needed to lead this industry. So again, they did hit that 50 exahash per second, and they talk a little bit about 60 exahash if we go a little bit further down. But we're going to skip the part where they highlight their different data centers. Of course, they're in different states such as Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Wyoming. But reading another quote from Zach here says, we've never pursued growth for its own sake. Bradford continued, every new megawatt and every additional exahash has been deliberately designed to create long-term shareholder value and advance our vision of becoming the global leader in Bitcoin mining, built right here in rural America. And that is something that the company always highlights, the fact that the majority of their data centers are all in rural parts of the US where there's excess power. Maybe there were some older facilities, some other industrial plants, manufacturing plants that have since been retired, leaving extra pockets of power. That is what CleanSpark does best, getting in at these low power contracts. But continuing on, as we look to the future, CleanSpark has laid the foundation to achieve 60 exahash and beyond. So they didn't give us a target there for that 60 exahash. We do know based off of some of their purchase orders and some of their call options for purchase orders that they could get some additional immersion miners. And if you did look at their 10Q that they put out last, they did mention they had over 300,000 miners, some of them new, ready to be deployed at various locations. Some of them were getting transferred for relocation, or some of them were pending repairs. So they do have a healthy backlog of Bitcoin miners already in their possession, and they have the optionality to purchase additional ones utilizing Bitcoin. And Gary did speak about one of those transactions where they were able to negotiate a specific call option using Bitcoin in order to be able to purchase those miners. But let's continue on a little bit past that. It says, this expansion capacity aligns with the company's broader strategy to grow with capital efficiency, only possible for an operator that has achieved escape velocity. So when they use that terminology, they're talking about the fact that they are able to monthly mine the Bitcoin and sell a portion to cover all the costs of energy as well as their SG&A. So I don't think this covers the depreciation aspect, but again, you don't have to pay for the depreciation. You just have to have the miners ready and available when the time comes to obsolete the existing miners. And as I mentioned, they have 100,000 sitting on the shelf here. That's that. They did talk a little bit about that digital asset management. So let's read that. CleanSpark's digital asset management division continues to mature, actively managing the company's self-mined Bitcoin holdings of more than 12,500, a strategic treasury asset to support growth. These activities began generating cash in May through active monetization and yield initiatives, forming a key element of CleanSpark's non-dilutive growth approach. So if you've been covering their press releases, you would have noticed that they did talk about selling some Bitcoin in both April and May. So I think this is a really interesting aspect that the company is starting to do. They're also selling some covered call options against the Bitcoin that they're already planning on selling. So let's say that the spot price of Bitcoin is, we'll just use $105,000. They may actually do a covered call option for 106, 107, or even $108,000, and they'll put it out for a 1 to 2 week call option. If the actual price of Bitcoin does not hit those prices, they collect that premium and then they still sell Bitcoin as they already planned in the month. So it does give them a little bit of additional revenue if you think about it in that kind of a way. So if you're looking at their month over month and you're looking at the amount that they mine versus the amount that they sell, you're going to be able to kind of calculate a profit margin. So my question for the company would be, are they actually selling a little bit less Bitcoin than they need based on their mining numbers because they're able to collect some of these premiums on these covered call options? So that is, again, another great way that the company is able to generate some additional cash flow and then hodl additional Bitcoin or have that Bitcoin or have that cash ready to be used in investment purposes. So, but let's read that last paragraph before we move over and take a look at these June numbers. So we're mining Bitcoin efficiently, holding it responsibly, and putting it to work in ways that drive shareholder value. Bradford concluded. With unmatched scale, non-dilutive growth in motion, and compelling opportunities on the horizon, I've never been more confident in CleanSpark's future or prouder of the team building it. So that was some really great words by the CEO. Love to see them continuing to build on this non-dilutive growth path. And I'm excited to see how they're able to continue to leverage this digital asset management company as their treasury continues to grow. Of course, they can look to expand that Coinbase line of credit to give them a little bit more liquidity and flexibility there for some cash, opportunities. But I'm interested to see if they're able to get in on any other type of yield optionality, whether it be lending of some of their Bitcoin or just how else they plan to kind of generate another revenue stream from their treasury. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the so far month to date June Bitcoin mining numbers. All right, and starting with the left-hand side, the first thing I want to point out is right under the CleanSpark title, you're going to see a hyperlink to the publicly traded wallet. I'll also have that hyperlink in the description of this video, but right below that, you can see the actual snippet or the actual section from the publicly traded wallet, and that is what I am using in order to be able to figure out what those daily mining numbers as well as what that daily mining revenue amount comes out to. So looking past that, let's take a look at the breakdown. Looking at that yellow column there, you can see I do have June 21st folded, and that is because that is the highest amount of daily Bitcoin mined since the halving took place, and that comes out at 23.9135 Bitcoin for a single day for CleanSpark. Moving past that, in the green column, that's going to be the revenue column. I want to show June 11th as the highest amount of daily Bitcoin revenue for CleanSpark, and it came in at $2,576,528. They did break 2.5 million quite a few times this month in June, and although it is a shorter month, 30 versus the 31 in May, they are looking rather healthy. It looks like they are going to be able to break that revenue amount that we saw in the month of May. We'll see it here in June. So that is excellent for the company. A lot of that has to do with the additional hash rate that they're bringing on board, as well, of course, with the price of Bitcoin. Looking at that, the average Bitcoin mined each day is around 22.97. It was over 23 per day, but because of the heat wave, I do believe that there was some curtailment that took place, as well as potentially powering off some of the units in order to be able to bring additional ones online. Between those two instances, I do believe that's what's caused the kind of slowdown on daily Bitcoin over the last couple of days. But remember, we will have a difficulty level change at the end of the month. I do believe it's on June 29th. So we will see a few days to round out the end of the month where we will have some healthy Bitcoin being mined because the difficulty level will be getting dropped. But for now, just looking at that from a run rate standpoint, it does look like currently month to date, we're sitting at 528 Bitcoin mined. and I do have them projected to end the month at 689.1481 Bitcoin. Now, again, with that level of difficulty, the daily Bitcoin mining should jump up those last couple days. But for now, this is what I do have them estimated to come in at. And taking a look at the May press release, again, the treasury amount is sitting at 12,502. I do have them selling an estimated 236 Bitcoin, and that is to cover the cost of operations. We'll go over that when we talk about cash flow in a little bit, but just keep that number in mind. Past that, the new HODL amount, I do have them coming in estimated at 12,794 Bitcoin. So again, I do think this is going to be a huge month for CleanSpark. So we'll have to see if they're able to continue adding to that. Can we break 12,800 Bitcoin in the treasury by the end of the month? I do believe that is definitely feasible. I think based on profit margins and where we're at already, we're going to be very close. So I'm excited to see that press release come out. Love to see it at that 13,000 mark, but I think we'll see that in the month of July. But looking at that May margin amount, that is going to be the amount of Bitcoin held divided by the amount of Bitcoin mined. That is a little bit different than the amount that I have at the bottom right. It's a 57.71% versus a 54.59%. I do believe that that profit margin percent difference has a little bit to do with that digital asset management team. I do think they are able to bring in some additional revenue, which means they're able to avoid selling a little bit of the Bitcoin. But we'll have to see in the press releases to come and maybe the earnings releases to come when we get a little bit more clarification just to how much revenue they're making on a month-to-month basis. But I'm excited. We did get a little sneak peek from Gary on some of those covered call options, and those premiums were looking pretty good for the options being short-sighted at just a week or so. So looking forward to that. But taking a look again, last price of Bitcoin I have coming in at $106,611. So with that last price, I do have the overall treasury as of the end of May at $1.332 billion. And looking at what they are going to be bringing in the month of June, I do have it estimated at $1,364,000,000. So huge, huge treasury value there. I do believe that the company is being undervalued just on their fundamentals, looking at what they have in terms of their digital assets, as well as their overall capital expenditures, their buildings, their properties. I do believe all of that is looking at their assets divided by that liability, that fair book value, and divided by the overall number of shares. I do believe that we should be higher than where we're at right now, fundamentally speaking. But again, my opinion, love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But moving past that, I do have that daily global hash rate, and I do calculate that because it's important in order to understand what an average hash is so that you can use that when you're trying to calculate what the energy cost to mine the Bitcoin is. But taking a look at that May mining amount, again, I'm looking at without depreciation. I do believe that considering depreciation, although it may be helpful on the earnings statement, I do think that the depreciation is just a way that they're able to write off some of their revenue, some of their profit, without having to pay taxes on it. Of course, they are going to want to replace the aging miners. But if you look at their overall inventory of miners, they're over 300,000. The last press release showed that they only have about 230,000 energized. So a pretty healthy amount of miners ready to kind of swap out to get rid of some of those aging miners. And the other benefit is these aging miners will be getting replaced with the more efficient immersion miners. So really excited as margins continue to increase as CleanSpark continues to scale. But let's now take a look at the cash flow. All right, and before we jump down into the cash flow and the profitability, let's take a closer look at this global hash rate graph. You can see here that this pink or reddish line is that level of difficulty, and it stayed pretty even so far the month in June. However, because the daily amount of Bitcoin being mined has been reduced, it's been coming out less than 450 it means that that level of difficulty has to change so that we're able to get back on track to ensure that we're able to mine the total amount of Bitcoin by the end of the year as planned. So I love the way that the entire Bitcoin algorithm, the Bitcoin ecosystem is set up to basically compensate for any time there is a significant change in global hash rate, just to make sure that we're still on track. So again, looking at that global hash rate, you're going to see that at the end of June so far, sometime around like June 21st, June 22nd, we did see a significant drop in global hash rate. Now, I do believe personally that that has a lot to do with the heat wave that we saw in the US. And some people have stated that the bombing that took place in Iran actually took out some of their nuclear substations, some of their power stations, so that their Bitcoin mining operations actually had to be curtailed. So between those two instances, that may explain the global hash rate drop. The only other thing I could think of would be the fact that the price of Bitcoin did drop a little bit. So maybe some companies were curtailing their Bitcoin operations a little bit. Not quite sure, but it's going to be interesting to see if we're done with that and we start to see some more beneficial numbers coming out here for the end of the month for CleanSpark. But taking a look at that cost to mine Bitcoin calculator I have at the bottom there, you're going to see that I'm using CleanSpark's latest efficiency number at 16.71 joules per terahash. That was disclosed in the May press release, and I have that little snippet here for you. And another thing to take a look at is the power cost. I did adjust the cost per kilowatt I did adjust the cost per kilowatt hour a little bit, and that was to try to get as close to the profit margin as possible because we have seen CleanSpark selling less Bitcoin than I expected them to be selling. And I think that may have to do a little bit with that digital asset management. But just to try to help adjust for that, I did adjust this cost per kilowatt hour of the energy usage. So with all that, I was able to get a new profit margin amount. You can see it there at 55.36%. Again, I'm using the energy cost to mine the Bitcoin at $32,554. And I do have the global hash rate sitting at about 875. I forgot to mention that when you are calculating the cost of mine Bitcoin, you do need to know the overall network hash. But outside of that, you're going to see some of the month to date costs for professional fees, the payroll, the G&A, all the SG&A items. I do have them all here. So far month to date, I do have the cost to mine all this Bitcoin for CleanSpark coming in $24,860,000. And taking a look at the revenue minus this total month to date cost, you're going to get a profit amount of $30,833,000 so far here in the month of June. And again, that's about 55.36% profit margin. So looking at cash flow next, I typically show the with and without depreciation columns. I've switched it to just show the without depreciation. As I mentioned before, the with depreciation amount, it really doesn't reflect the cash spend they have on a month-to-month basis. So if I'm trying to look at that free cash flow, I'm going to do it without depreciation calculated. So again, looking at that, they have that 96,982,000 as of the start of the quarter, and they have that 200 million Coinbase line of credit. Now, if you look at the footnotes of the press release, they have already basically used 2,210 Bitcoin as collateral to be able to draw down from that Coinbase line of credit. And I'm using about a 70% loan to value ratio. With that, I'm estimating that they've probably drawn down about 150 million out of that Coinbase line of credit. And that would help them cover the overall commitments as well as this quarter to date cost to mine the Bitcoin, again, with the depreciation. Looking at all of that together, looking at that quarter to date Bitcoin being sold, I have their overall cash balance without Coinbase at a negative 58 million. So of course, we know they've already cashed in on some of this Coinbase line of credit. I have them still sitting on a nice 141 million $294,000 of cash. And again, that's if they were to utilize the entire 200 million of this Coinbase line of credit. And one last thing to talk about is that month to date, monthly Bitcoin that I have them hodling. So looking at that total amount they've mined, subtracting the amount that I believe they're selling. This is their HODL amount that would be added to their treasury, almost 300 Bitcoin to So again, as I mentioned, I do think they're going to be pretty close to 12,800 within the next couple of days. And depending on how much Bitcoin they get with this level of difficulty change, it would be nice to see them around 12,900. But I won't hold my breath. I'll be happy around that 12,800 Bitcoin mining amount. All right, and that about wraps it up for me, folks. I hope you enjoyed this quick CleanSpark update. We did take a look at that press release, and then I followed up by reviewing their June month-to-date mining numbers so far. I gave you some opinions on what that profit margin could be like and what I'm estimating for some of their cash flow values. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider giving it a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and drop some comments. Let me know how I did so far. I'd love to get that feedback. If you think I need to kind of hone in and make some adjustments here, I'm always open to feedback, and I will definitely take that into consideration for future months to come. So with all that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your day. Keep calm. I'm Sean, and I'll see you on the next one.